Hi, welcome to this video. We're going to develop exercises 6 to 9 of chapter 24, Measuring the Cost of Living. Remember, this is a book of Gregory Mankiw, Principles of Economics. So, 6 questions says, which of the problems in the construction of the CPI might be illustrated by each of the following situations? Explain. First, the invention of a cell phone. So the first thing is that before the invention of the cell phone, naturally it wasn't taken into account inside the normal basket for a consumer. So after some time, when actually most of the people had a cell phone, definitely it went to the CPI. Then these variations in the meantime, obviously, they weren't taken into account. The important thing is, like, when there is a cell phone, naturally consumers face more variety, different cell phones with different characteristics, and then it's kind of different or kind of difficult to measure the value of the cell phone to put into the basket. Then at the end of the day, remember, when there is more variety, each dollar is worth more because you have several possibilities to spend it. Then in that case, at the end of the day, the CPI didn't decrease because these new considerations of new products, so it's difficult to make like measurement of this. And then this reduction of the cost of living is not shown because, for example, before you needed to pay, for example, put coins for a public telephone in the street, and now definitely should be really different because anytime you want, you just make a call, and the tariff or the fees for that service is definitely much cheaper. And then the other important thing is that with innovation, with different cell phones, with different characteristics, even maybe the price can be higher at first, but then most of the time it goes down. The point is, like, sometimes with the CPI, definitely, because it just measures prices, but we are not taking into account changes in quality. Therefore, at the end, maybe we're not measuring the benefit of these maybe higher prices but better quality of life for people. The introduction of airbags in cars. It's kind of similar with the cell phone, so we are talking into unmeasured quality of change. So then obviously the quality is better because of the safety provided by cars. However, the CPI doesn't take into account and just measure the variation of the price. Then the Bureau of Labor Statistics adjusted the change of the price, but then definitely the quality is not measured. The other one is the increased personal computer purchases in response to a decline in the price. So then, because this situation, so maybe you had before yours like desktop computers, and maybe they were into the basket for a normal family, but when with the slow introduction of laptops, people start to deviate their purchases. Instead of buying desktop computers, they are buying laptops. So definitely the CPI is taking into account just the desktop, but then the one that should be calculated more should be laptop, for example, what we call substitution bias. And definitely, again, the unmeasured quality of change, because it just measures prices, not the quality of the computer, that maybe with more capacity of RAM, speed, or maybe the quantity of gigas or teras that you can keep in your computer, it is not taken into account in the CPI. More scoops of raisin in each package of raisin bran. So then definitely should be an adjustment of baskets, because maybe just not one box, but you need maybe just half a box or something. So then this variation is the basket remain the same as a box of raisin bran, definitely is not measuring the same because the price has changed, but not in terms of per grams, because maybe it should be cheaper if you are receiving more quantity of the product inside the box. Greater use of fuel efficient cars after gasoline prices increase. So then again, substitution bias. As you know, usually the oil is inside the CPI, but maybe the increase, it represents like a lower purchasing capacity, purchasing power, but that's not true, because people start to use other alternatives of energy. In that case, for example, electric energy or something different with less quantity of oil, of gasoline. So definitely there is a substitution bias that is not taken into account in the CPI. 7. The New York Times costs 15 cents in 1970 and $2 in 2011. The average wage in manufacturing was 3.36 per hour in 1970 and 23.09 in 2011. By what percentage did the price of newspaper rise? So first the price in 1970, the price in 2011, the wages per hour in 1970, and then in 2011. So then, as a variations, you already know that you are familiar with that computation, that any percentage variation, you just need like final value minus initial value over initial value. So the final value in this case is the price of 2011 minus the initial value should be the price in 1970 over price in 1970. You just replace the values, you compute, and you end up with more than 1000% change. 1233.33%. Is that extremely huge? But as you can see here, it increased several times, so naturally it's more than 1000. B. By what percentage did the wage rise? Again, you need to compute final value minus initial value over initial value times 100 to get the percentage. You have just replace the values that we already have. They were already provided by the exercise, and then you have this value 587.2% of increase compared 2011 compared with 1970. C. In each year, how many minutes did a worker have to work to earn enough to buy a newspaper? So this was the price that we already have. So first we're going to start realizing about the minutes for buying a newspaper in 1970. So you know that should be the wage in minutes should be exactly the wage in hour that was already provided by the exercise over 60, because 60 minutes is 1 hour. Then you have 3.36 over 60. Then each minute in 1970 you got 0.056. This is not even a cent, like half of a cent. And then the minute buying a newspaper in 1970 should be the price in 1970 over the wage by minute in 1970. So then you just replace 0.15 over 0.056, and then you have 2.67. So then you need around 2 minutes and a little bit more than a half to buy a newspaper of work. What about this is not 1970, sorry. What about 2011? You have the W, so the wage in minutes in 2011 is exactly the same as the wage in 2011 over 60, and then you just replace the values, you make the computation, you have at the end that you need 0.38 sorry, the wage per minute was 0.38 48. That was the wage. It was almost 40 cents. And then the minute for buying a newspaper should be the price of 2011 over the wage in minutes 2011. So then you have 2 over 0.3848. So then you have that you need in 2011 5 minutes to buy a newspaper. Did workers' purchasing power in terms of newspapers rise or fall? So first you need in 1970 you needed 2.67 minutes for buying a newspaper, and 2011 you need 5 minutes. Then definitely the purchasing power fall. So then the prices of the newspaper increased more than the wage per hour comparing 1970 to 2011. 8. The chapter explains that Social Security benefits are increased each year in proportion to the increase in the CPI, even though most economists believe that the CPI overstates actual inflation. A. If the elderly consume the same market basket as other people, does Social Security provide the elderly with an improvement in their standard of living each year? Explain. So I would say that we are talking about improvement in standard of living because even they are compensated with the same value of the same percentage of the inflation. You know that maybe instead of buying some products because they have increased more, those people can incline in some way to the other products that they remain the same price or even they are cheaper. So maybe this substitution bias make a difference with other people that they receive maybe even less than the inflation. In fact, the elderly consume more healthcare compared to younger people, and healthcare costs have risen faster than overall inflation. What would you do to determine whether the elderly are actually better off from year to year? So first, as you already know, we need to focus definitely on purchasing power. It may be with this inflation that they are being compensated year by year, and and maybe in that case, for example, healthcare costs have risen faster than overall inflation, and then the social security benefits has increased lower than that. Maybe with other products they are compensating and they are providing a priority to these kind of products, even if the price is increasing. So maybe we're talking some about elasticity, so they are more inelastic to changes in prices. So even the prices has increased, they continue to consume these kind of goods. 9. Suppose that a borrower and a lender agree on the nominal interest rate to be paid on a loan. The inflation turns out to be higher than they both expected. So, is the real interest rate on this loan higher or lower than expected? Well, we saw throughout the chapter that the real interest rate is exactly equal the nominal rate minus inflation. If the inflation is higher to the nominal rate, you are facing negative real interest rates. On the other side, if the nominal rate is higher than the inflation, you are facing real interest rate positive. So then, in this case, the inflation was higher as expected. So naturally, the result, keeping nominal rate constant, we are facing real interest rate lower, even negative, if inflation is higher than nominal rate. Does the lender gain or lose from this unexpectedly high inflation? Does the borrower gain or lose? So then, the lender is worse off and the borrower is better off. Why? Because the lender is worse off because at the end of the day what he really matters is the real interest rate. And if the real interest rate is lower, he's receiving less return for the loan. So definitely is worse off. Different the case of the borrower, because if the real interest rate is lower as expected, he or she will be paying lower than before was established in the contract. See, inflation during 1970s was much higher than most people had expected when the decade began. How did this affect homeowners who obtained fixed rate mortgages during 1960s? How did it affect the banks that lent the money? So naturally the homeowners are better off because this one was fixed, which is called the nominal rate, and then the inflation was higher as expected, so the real interest rate the homeowners were paying was lower. Contrary the case of the banks, because they are receiving less real interest rate. So I hope it has worked. I hope you have learned something or you have a better understanding of those concepts. I'm more than open to receive your comments, something that maybe you think can be processed in different way. If you like it, subscribe it. That's it. Thumbs up. Bye bye.